Let's talk about something really strange, something that happened in 2025. As the world started pushing harder and harder for peace in Ukraine, a brutal and frankly weird paradox emerged. The closer everyone got to talking about ending the war, the deadlier it became for Russian soldiers on the ground. This is the story of that deadly peace.
And to really get our heads around this, we have to look at the story of just one man, a guy named Marat Mukashev. He made a massive gamble, a life or death decision, all based on that promise of peace. And that gamble, well, it cost him everything.
So, this is the story of Murat Mukashev. His personal tragedy is like a window that lets us see the impossible choices that thousands of Russians are facing, all caught in the gears of this war. And what's so wild about this is that Mukashev was the last person you'd expect to see in a Russian uniform. I mean, this guy was a known activist. He'd spent years speaking out against Putin, against police brutality, and very publicly against the war itself. But then, in early 2024, he gets arrested on drug charges and is suddenly facing a decade behind bars. So there he is on trial, and they lay out this impossible choice for him. On one hand, he can try to fight the charges, but in a country where the acquittal rate is less than 1%, that's a long shot to say the least. Or he can sign a contract with the military. He can join the very war he hated to make the whole criminal case just go away. At first, he stuck to his guns. He said no, refused the deal, and got a sentence, 10 years in a high-security prison. But by November of 2024, from inside his cell, something changed his mind. The news was suddenly filled with all this talk of peace deals, a real chance the fighting could stop. And that news changed everything for him. He figured, hey, the war's almost over. This is my get-out-of-jail-free card. He signed the contract thinking it was just a quick ticket to freedom. But that peace he was banking on, it never came for him. On June 11th, 2025, Marat Mukashev was killed in action in the Kharkiv region. And look, Marat's story is heartbreaking, but it's not a one-off. It's actually a perfect, personal example of this much bigger, really counterintuitive trend that was happening on the battlefield all through 2025. Which brings us to the big question, right? How on earth could talking about peace lead directly to more killing? How could these high-level diplomatic efforts to end the war cause a massive spike in Russian casualties? It just doesn't make sense on the surface. Well, get this. A BBC analysis from 2025, the same year all these peace talks were ramping up, found a staggering 40% increase in confirmed Russian military deaths compared to the year before. The push for peace was literally fueling the killing machine. All right, let's actually dig into the numbers, because when you see how the diplomatic calendar lines up with the death toll, it's pretty shocking. Okay, take a look at this. You can see this really disturbing pattern emerge. Notice in February, right after those talks between Trump and Putin, boom, confirmed deaths start to climb. Then again in August, during the Alaska summit, you see another, even higher spike. And by November, when the U.S. puts a formal peace proposal on the table, the daily deaths just go off the charts to the highest point of the entire war. And to really understand what that surge means, check this out. By late 2025, we're talking about an average of 322 obituaries being published every single day. That's literally double the daily average from 2024. These aren't just abstract statistics. This represents thousands and thousands of lives lost right as the world was talking about peace. So you gotta ask, why? Why would Russia do this? Well, you don't have to guess. The Kremlin basically tells us. Putin's aide, Yuri Ushakov, said it flat out. Battlefield successes have a positive impact on negotiations. The strategy couldn't be clearer. Grab as much land as you can, no matter the human cost, because that's your leverage when you finally sit down at the bargaining table. Okay, so if they're willing to take these massive losses, that brings up another huge question. How are they even managing to keep their army from just falling apart? How do you sustain that level of carnage? The secret is all about who is actually fighting and dying. See this chart? The share of casualties among so-called volunteers, and yeah, we should put a big asterisk on that word, it just exploded. It jumped from just 15% a year ago to over a third of all deaths in 2025. They have become the primary disposable manpower for the front line.
So, how are they getting all these volunteers? Well, they have this whole recruitment playbook. They're avoiding another big, unpopular draft. Instead, they're dangling huge salaries, specifically targeting people who are deep in debt, running recruitment campaigns at universities, and pressuring guys like Murat Mukashev, conscripts, and criminal defendants into signing up. It's a nonstop, targeted churn for more bodies. And when you step back and just look at the raw numbers, the cold, hard math of it all, that's when you see how this grim strategy actually works for them. All right, first number, NATO estimates Russia is losing 25,000 soldiers, that's killed or wounded, every single month. I mean, that's just an absolutely catastrophic number. But then you look at this. Russia's own data says they're successfully recruiting more than 30,000 new soldiers each month. And there it is. That's the terrifying math. Even with these unbelievable monthly losses, the recruitment machine is actually outpacing the war. They're bringing in more men than they're losing. From a purely logistical point of view, it means they can just keep this meat grinder going. And this just shows you the staggering human toll of it all, for both sides. We're talking a combined total of over 1.5 million casualties, an estimated 250,000 dead for Russia, and up to 140,000 for Ukraine. These numbers are almost too big to comprehend, but they represent the real cost of the strategy. So all of this leaves us with one really haunting question. If Russia truly believes that every village captured, every meter of ground gained, and every life lost makes their hand stronger in peace talks, then what is the real human price of any deal that gets made? What is the price of that peace?